faithfully delivering value, interpreting great books from around the world. Hi, this is Sally talking books. Today we're diving into the book Into Thin Air. Dubbed the Mountaineer's Bible, it chronicles the biggest disaster ever on Mount Everest. Back in May 1996, 4 Everest expeditions lost 12 lives. John Krakauer, the author, was actually part of one of those teams. Reflecting on it, he stated, "Scaling Everest was my life's greatest blunder." John's a true climbing nut. He used to believe his sole purpose was mountaineering. To fund his passion, he took jobs as a carpenter and fisherman. Eventually, he merged climbing and writing, becoming a journalist focused on outdoor adventures. His book, Into the Wild, topped the New York Times bestseller list for more than 2 years, cementing his status as a top-notch adventure author. John scaled plenty of risky peaks, yet, like countless climbers, Everest, the world's highest, remained his ultimate challenge. In 1996, when a magazine asked John to tag along as a reporter with a commercial Everest expedition, he jumped at the chance. Little did he know, he was heading straight into Everest's deadliest disaster. In Into Thin Air, John reconstructs the tragedy firsthand. Crucially, he digs into the issues with Everest expeditions run by commercial outfits. These very issues led to the loss of 12 lives. After hitting shelves in 1997, Into Thin Air shot straight to the top of the New York Times bestseller list. It bagged several big awards, like Times Book of the Year and the Pulitzer for Nonfiction. Climbers call it a must-read Bible, and its take on commercial expeditions remains a cautionary tale. So, how did this tragedy unfold? How did Everest get commercialized? Why are prideful, clueless folk so fragile against nature's might? Now, let's step with John into Everest's thin air. Truth be told, scaling Everest is like suicide in a way. From 1921, when the British first tried to climb Everest, by 1996, over the 75 years since John's climb, Everest had taken 130 lives. Roughly 1 in every 4 climbers who reach the summit dies from crevasses, avalanches, or freezing temps of minus 70 to 80 degrees. Each is a deadly killer. But on Everest's peak, the deadliest issue is oxygen shortage. Oxygen levels are only 1/3 of sea level. Decompression chamber tests prove that if you suddenly pull someone from sea level to Everest summit, they'd pass out in minutes and die fast. So climbers gotta climb slow to let their bodies adapt. Plus, in low oxygen conditions, the brain gets sluggish, judgment fails, and one wrong step could send you tumbling into an abyss. That's why in Everest's early days, it was for elite climbers. Only the world's strongest and most skilled could earn a summit spot. But with climbing know-how and gear advances, commercial mountaineering firms popped up, changing Everest's original climbing scene. These companies act like nannies, providing guides, porters, food, bottled oxygen, preset ropes, and high-altitude training for average climbers. Climbers just need to pay big bucks, have enough stamina and grit, and climb up to reach the top. In the 80s, the climbing world once sneered at Everest, calling it a slag heap, meaning it's a mountain that's short on technical challenge. An event in 1985 made that bias even stronger. A 50-year-old American with little climbing experience made it to Everest's summit with a top-notch guide. And boom, hordes of amateur climbers flooded Everest. Like when author John climbed in spring 1996, 30 teams swarmed Everest's sides. At least 10 were profit-driven commercial outfits, including John's team. In March 1996, John flew to Kathmandu, Nepal's capital. The team had 7 other members, and Leader Hall is the book's key figure. Hall, 35, a New Zealander, scaled a Himalayan peak over 6,800 meters at just 18. At 28, he led an expedition team to the summit of Mount Everest as the leader. Professional mountaineers usually rely on sponsors to cover their climbing expenses. Smart Hall realized this wasn't sustainable. because to get continuous sponsorship from companies, climbers have to up the ante. The next climbing expedition must be more challenging and appealing than the last. Uh, it's like winding up a clock spring. Eventually, he would die on a more difficult climbing route. So he switched careers to become a mountain guide and founded a company called Adventure Consultants. The business is helping customers climb Everest to earn climbing fees. Hall's performance was excellent. From 1990 to 1995, he got 39 customers to the summit of Everest with a very high success rate. You could say, as long as money's no issue, Adventure Consultants is the best choice. Of course, Hall charged a hefty fee, $65,000 per person, which at the time was equivalent to a mortgage on a house in Seattle, not including round-trip airfare to Nepal or personal gear costs. Another key figure in the book is Hall's rival, named Fisher. He and Hall are both friends and competitors. 40 years old, outgoing. At 14, he was captivated by a mountaineering TV show and signed up for wilderness training courses. After high school, he became an outdoor instructor, thus entering the climbing profession. A famous mountaineer once said of him, "Fisher can push himself beyond any physical limit." Fisher craved success, recognition in the climbing world, and wealth. But the mountain guide job kept him away from home often, straining his marriage and causing financial troubles. Um, Seeing Hall make a fortune, Fisher saw his chance and switched to doing Everest business, founding a company called Mountain Madness. He believed that as long as he could catch up with Hall, he could make loads of money. In the spring of 1996, Fisher also led a team to the foot of Everest. Hall and Fisher's teams were the two largest in the 1996 spring climbing season, each with 8 clients, 1 leader, 2 guides, and 12 or so support staff. These support staff handled medical care, transporting supplies up the mountain, and so on. Most clients were high-income folks like doctors, business people, and executives, people with money and free time, but they were amateurs in skill. Family and career demands left them little time for outdoor climbing practice. Though they looked fit, that was just from treadmill workouts. Some had near zero experience with mountain or ice climbing. For example, during Everest Base Camp training, 3 showed up with brand new mountaineering boots. Unaware how dangerous that is, never wear new boots. It's basic outdoor knowledge. Mountaineering boots are stiffer than regular shoes and can easily cause blisters before being broken in. Another client, Yasuko Namba, a 47-year-old Japanese executive at a Tokyo multinational, shockingly couldn't properly use crampons, essential high-altitude gear, forcing a guide to spend a whole morning teaching her basic ice climbing. These rich folks were as arrogant as could be. But for Hall and Fisher then, these amateurs were cash cows. Even those totally unfit for Everest, they wouldn't turn down. In Hall's team was Doug Hansen, a 46-year-old American postal worker. He climbed Everest once with Hall, but turned back near the summit due to safety risks. Since then, he dreamed daily of returning to Everest. However, that climb gave Hansen severe frostbite, costing him a big toe and causing permanent poor circulation. Right before this expedition, he'd had throat surgery, leaving his trachea highly sensitive, a condition that made Everest completely unsuitable. But Hall kept urging Hansen to try again, and some clients climbed Everest just for fame. In Fisher's team was a millionaire woman named Sandy Hill Pittman. She loved the spotlight, claiming she'd be the first American woman to summit the highest peaks on all 7 continents. During the climb, she had someone roll her sleeping bag daily and had fashion magazines express delivered to base camp. Her luggage was like moving house. 2 laptops, 4 cameras, 2 typewriters, and so on. And to celebrate Easter on Everest, she even packed 4 chocolate-coated Easter eggs. Obviously, as long as you have money, you can maintain a decent and luxurious life even on Everest. This kind of behavior is despised by professional mountaineers. But for commercial climbing companies, the customer is king. Even Pittman's unreasonable demands, they strive to fulfill. Moreover, Pittman was also a web reporter for NBC on this trip. As long as they could get her to the summit, it meant all of America would know Fisher's name. That's how the customer's vanity and the climbing company's pursuit of profit kept sending people with far insufficient physical ability and experience to the world's highest peak. As I said earlier, if you flew someone from sea level to Everest summit at over 8,800 meters, they'd quickly die from lack of oxygen. So, how do climbers overcome this problem? One word: adaptation. According to Hall's plan, first, the team flies from Kathmandu to Lukla at 2,800 meters in a small plane. Lukla, located in eastern Nepal, is the gateway to Everest Base Camp, and this altitude has no effect on people. Then, the team treks from Lukla to Everest Base Camp at 5,360 meters, taking 8 days. The base camp has only half the oxygen of sea level, but as they ascend slowly, they gradually adapt to the thin air. Finally, from base camp to Everest, it takes about a month for acclimatization training. Between base camp and the summit, there's a simple camp every 600 meters in elevation. Climbers start from Camp 1 and gradually ascend to Camp 4 at 7,900 meters, waiting for their bodies to fully adapt before summiting on the final day with oxygen bottles. On the evening of May 9th, 1996, the constant wind on Everest stopped, making it perfect summit weather. Hall's team launched their summit push, and Fisher's team went up too. Hall confidently believed that this method had successfully gotten 39 people to the summit, so there'd be no issues. But John, as a reporter, keenly spotted many risks that Hall might have missed or dismissed. The first issue: safety concerns. John discovered that on Everest, the other end of his rope wasn't tied to a teammate, but to a fixed rope pre-attached to the ice. This is the opposite of professional climbers' approach. They rope together with teammates, so if an accident happens, the other would risk their life to save them, and vice versa. But in commercial climbing teams, that's clearly impossible. First, everyone's strangers. It's hard to build life or death trust in a short time. Who'd entrust their life to someone they've known less than a month? Second, the team's skill levels vary wildly. They can't climb at the same pace. So everyone's lives were entrusted to those fixed ropes. So what if those fixed ropes failed? In fact, at the crucial summit push, the team faced this deadly issue. Professionals set their own fixed ropes, but in commercial teams, you can't expect clients to do it. So each year, Call and other leaders would coordinate to fix ropes on rocks or ice beforehand, letting clients just climb along them. On May 10th's summit push, poor coordination meant 2 sections above 8,000 meters had no fixed ropes, forcing climbers to crowd the route while waiting. Looking back, the near 2-hour delay there caused some to descend too late, leading to heavy casualties and a blizzard. The second problem was with the guides. Where were the rope setters? One key person was Lopsine, Fisher's guide, who was supposed to lead and set ropes. But on summit day, he lagged far behind. His physical state was terrible. Turns out the day before, he'd carried Pittman's 14-kilo satellite phone to Camp 4. It drained his energy, yet the phone was nearly useless up there. More shockingly, even weakened, Lopsang roped himself to Pittman and dragged her up, a highly dangerous move. Why would Lopsang do this? One explanation: Lopsang was Fisher's good friend and knew how vital Pittman was to him. Fisher once asked someone, "If I get Pittman to the summit, I bet she'll be on TV. Do you think she'll mention me when bragging?" Another guide who severely neglected his duties was Anatoly Bukreev, also on Fisher's team. She'd summited Everest twice without oxygen, super strong physically. But irresponsibly, he carried no oxygen on summit day. The key to climbing without oxygen is speed. Lingering too long causes massive damage from oxygen deprivation. The brain also easily loses judgment, meaning Bucrive couldn't fulfill his guide duties to help his clients. Plus, a guide's pack should have emergency gear like ropes and first aid. Bucrive brought none of it. In fact, that day, Bucrive descended way ahead of others, returning to camp and leaving his clients in the blizzard. The last and deadliest issue was the leader's mistake with the turnaround time. Everest weather has a pattern. After noon, it turns bad. Breezes become gales or even blizzards. So guides repeatedly stress the turnaround time to every summit climber. Once time's up, no matter where you are or how close to the summit, you must turn back. Turnaround time is usually no later than 2 p.m., but on summit day, Hall delayed announcing it. John summited around 1 p.m. At the top, he saw clouds engulfing the valley, signaling an afternoon blizzard. But other clients, unaware of the danger, kept climbing. Most reached the summit after the cutoff, and Hansen, the physically unfit one, got near the summit only by 4 p.m. For climbers like Hansen, if weather and conditions are perfect, commercial companies' nanny-style service might get them down alive. But the sudden blizzard, plus all the issues mentioned, ultimately cost 5 lives. First, Yasuko Namba. She was a petite Japanese woman. From the book's description, her stamina wasn't enough for summiting. About 100 meters below Everest summit, there's a near vertical rock face, 12 meters high. It's a famous obstacle on Everest called the Hillary Step. Author John, while descending, saw Namba spending 15 minutes there but failing to climb it. She was exhausted beyond her strength. In the end, someone behind pushed her bottom to help her up. Yasuko reached the summit after 2 p.m. When descending, her Hall team guides were still at the summit. While waiting for other members, Fisher's guide Beedman spotted her and took her down together. Beedman was a key hero, Fisher's junior guide with strong responsibility. He was supposed to meet Fisher at the summit before descending, but he waited until after 3 p.m., over an hour past cutoff, with no sign of Fisher. Ooh. By then, thick clouds and snow rolled in, and some teammates were failing. Ooh. Like the showy millionaire Pittman, semi-conscious, needing Beedman to hold her harness to descend. So Beedman stopped waiting and led the team down himself. Along the way, they saw Hall's Yasuko and others, all in terrible shape, barely able to descend independently. Near Camp 4, Beedman formed them into an 11-person group that could have safely reached camp. But just 15 minutes from camp, the blizzard intensified into hurricane-force winds, reducing visibility under 6 meters. Had they descended earlier, or had the storm delayed 30 minutes, they'd have safely drunk tea and slept at camp. But reality was, they got completely lost in the blizzard. Fleeing the wind, the group unknowingly strayed off course. At over 8,000 meters, temperatures plunged to minus 73 degrees Celsius. Oxygen depleted, everyone near collapse. Some had frozen eyes. They punched each other to maintain warmth. As sole guide, Beedman saved them. He deduced Camp 4's location, took 5 able men for help, leaving 1 to care for 4 incapacitated, including Yasuko. When rescuers arrived next day, Yasuko appeared dead, her right hand bones fused by frostbite. Rescuers could only evacuate 1 person at a time, forcing them to make a cruel but practical choice. Prioritize those with higher survival chances, and so Yasuko was left forever in the ice and snow. In fact, later rescuers searching for Yasuko's body shockingly discovered her still breathing beneath the snow. But after discussion, they decided to leave Yasuko there to die. Even if carried to base camp, she wouldn't survive. Plus, others needed rescue explanation. Priority went to those with better survival odds. Yasuko's death became front-page news across Japan. With teammates in peril, where were leaders, Hall and Fisher? Hall summited around 2 p.m., Even past cutoff, his skills gave him better storm survival odds than others. Had he descended promptly, he might have saved Yasuko, but he chose to wait atop for Hansen. Exactly 1 year earlier, at 2:30 p.m., Hall ordered Hansen, just 100 meters from summit, to turn back. This time, Hall desperately wanted Hansen to summit, even when Hansen tried quitting multiple times, nearly turning back that very day. Paul talked him out of it each time. Only by 4 p.m. did Hansen reach near summit. Survivors recall Hall helping Hansen climb the final 12 meters by supporting his neck, then beginning descent. But Hansen, newly summited, had exhausted all strength and oxygen. He collapsed immediately upon descent. At 4:30 p.m., Hall radioed twice. He and Hansen were in trouble near summit, desperately needing oxygen. Iris, a guide from Hall's team, was already descending. Hearing Hall's SOS, he turned back with oxygen bottles, slowly climbing toward summit. What followed is pieced from Hall's broken radio transmissions. Harris delivered 2 oxygen bottles, but ice-clogged mask valves prevented them from getting oxygen. And, oxygen-starved and confused, Hall didn't know when Harris left. He kept radioing. Did Harris make it back? Harris's fate remains unknown, presumed lost in the blizzard after delivery. When urged to abandon Hansen, Hall refused. Prolonged hypoxia and freezing temperatures left Hall frostbitten, immobile, and fading, utterly incapacitated. After enduring the night near the summit, he radioed at dawn. Hansen was dead. But even without Hansen's burden, Hall now lacked the strength to descend. Surviving that night at 8,750 meters, sub-zero temps, no shelter or oxygen, was already miraculous. On May 11th, around 9:30 a.m., rescuers with hot tea and oxygen attempted to reach Hall. Fierce winds forced them back just 210 meters from Hall. After 5 hours, his last hope vanished. Around 6 p.m., they connected Hall with his wife in New Zealand. His final words over radio: "I love you. Sleep well, my darling. Don't worry too much." These were Hall's last words to the world. 12 days later, climbers found Hall's body buried under snow. Hall's mistake cost both Hansen and Harris their lives. Fisher's situation was worse. He didn't summit until nearly 4 p.m. on the 10th. Several noticed Fisher's extreme weakness during the climb, including John, yet no one offered help. Clients saw Fisher as invincible, strong and needing no assistance. Only at 6 p.m. did Fisher admit he was too ill to descend and needed rescue. Per John's analysis, Fisher had exhausted himself before summoning. He'd expended critical energy rescuing a teammate earlier, while his guides failed to support him. Lizards delayed rescuers until the next day. They deemed the barely alive Fisher unsalvageable, abandoned like Yasuko. He died on the ridge at 8,290 meters. As John and survivors descended from Camp 4, grief overwhelmed them. 5 dead from 2 teams that days before had summited together. Among them, Hall's team lost 4. Leader Hall, Guide Harris, members Yasuko Namba and Hansen, while Fisher's team lost Leader Fisher himself. Even before the summit push, a logistics member from Fisher's team died in an accident. Several others barely survived, but suffered severe injuries, forever altering their lives after Everest. For example, one of John's teammates, Dr. Weathers, had his right arm amputated below the elbow and lost his nose. But the tragedy continued. Teams from India and Japan were still climbing after them. Of course, they also encountered the blizzard, and several Indians perished. Before they died, Japanese climbers passed by and discovered Indians on the brink of death. But the Japanese didn't say a word, nor did they offer water, food, or oxygen. Later in interviews, the Japanese explained, "We were too exhausted to help anyone." At altitudes over 8,000 meters, people can't afford to consider morality. In May 1996, Everest claimed 12 lives in total. This was the deadliest climbing season since the first ascent of Everest, thus called the worst disaster in Everest's history. Actually, many believed such a tragedy was inevitable. given the surge of unqualified climbers flocking to Everest. Earlier, I mentioned many mistakes made by commercial teams, like not setting ropes beforehand, not establishing turnaround times or enforcing them. My it, the question is, why did experienced climbers like Hall and Fisher make such basic errors? John believes it's related to the competition between them. Fisher craved success and wealth. It was his first time leading a team to Everest's summit, under immense pressure to make a big splash. So for socialites like Pittman, they'd carry her up, even if it meant literally carrying her. As for Hall, if Fisher succeeded, he might eat into Hall's market share. Besides that, they faced many external pressures. As mentioned earlier, many clients' physical conditions and climbing experience weren't sufficient for summiting, but they paid huge sums just to stand on Everest's peak. There were cases where clients sued guides for not reaching the summit. In the mountain guiding industry, getting clients to the summit is the lifeblood of the business. John, the author, was likely another source of pressure. After the disaster, one of Hall's clients said in an interview that having a reporter like John along added immense invisible pressure on Hall. He said Hall surely wanted to appear perfect in the media. Of course, it's easy to be wise after the event, and that's irresponsible flippancy. In this disaster, John reminds us, above 8,000 meters, clear consciousness is impossible. Ultimately, climbing Everest is an extremely dangerous endeavor. Before taking Hall and Fisher, Everest had destroyed many top climbers' lives. Though commercial companies boast about their safe, perfect systems, even the strongest systems are no match for Everest. After all, it's Mount Everest. But humans are foolish and forgetful. Historical experience shows that when given the chance to stand atop the world, people lose judgment at an alarming rate. Experienced climbers long warned that what happened on Everest in spring 1996 would repeat the next season. Here's a stark example. Just 2 weeks after the May 10th disaster, climbers still headed for the summit. One was 37-year-old Harold, a skilled climber who, for some reason, didn't summit until 5 p.m. During the earlier disaster, he was at Camp 4, hearing Hall's desperate radio calls and seeing frostbitten climbers hobble like mummies. On his own climb, he even passed Fisher and Hall's bodies. But humans are so forgetful. Despite his slow pace and the late hour, he continued to the summit. At 5:15 p.m., Base Camp last contacted Harold by radio and then lost him forever. He was the 12th life lost that climbing season. Well, that's our interpretation of Into Thin Air. The reading notes are below the audio. See you tomorrow.